With me today is Brooke Arnold. Brooke is a writer, a filmmaker, a professor, and former member of the IBLP cult. Most recently, Brooke was featured in the Shiny Happy People documentary, Prime Video's #1 documentary series on the Duggar family and the IBLP cult. Brooke, thank you so much for joining me, and congratulations on the massive success of Shiny Happy People. It's just so exciting as another former member. Seeing this stuff come to light finally is just so validating and gratifying. So thank you for everything that you've done to get the word out there. Just really appreciate it. What was it like for you, Brooke, just kind of reliving your experiences in the IBLP cult during this documentary? What was that? How was that?
Well, I feel like I've been on the Bill Gothard beat for quite a while. I started speaking out about it in 2015. I think at that point in my life, I had been out for about 15-ish years, 10, 15-ish years. And I had just completely pushed it out of my mind, out of my life. Like, my closest friends didn't know about it. It was not something that I talked about or thought about. Every 6 months, I would Google Bill Gothard to see if he were still alive, and put my hand up on the screen to cover his face so I wouldn't have to see his face, while I was doing it. But I just kind of completely was like, I got to go on with my life. I don't want to pick this hornet's nest, I think is what I said in the film. But that was a long process. So I guess I started in 2015. I published an article for Salon which the editors really embarrassingly named "I Could Have Been a Duggar Wife." And yeah,
that's very clickbaity. Okay, I get it.
It's very clickbaity, right? Yeah. And of course, like, the top comment was like, "You're not good looking enough to be a Duggar wife." And I was just rude. Like, ouch, people. Boo.
The trolls, they'll get you every time.
Oh, they definitely do. So after I published that, I got in touch with an Emmy award-winning editor, and she was interested. She had worked on 19 Kids and Counting, and so she was interested in doing, like, she called it the anti-19 Kids.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So like, this was her idea for the initial
kind of like an expose on it. And then we started working on that together, and eventually it kind of evolved into this idea of we were going to do a 6-episode docuseries called American Gothard. And in the process of that is when process of working on that and researching for that is kind of when I really started to feel like I was getting pulled back in. The teachings, you forget about them for a long time, but they're deeply embedded in your body, and they're deeply embedded in your spirit, and they're deeply embedded in your soul. And almost pulling back that curtain, even like just a little bit, created this huge avalanche within my life. It kind of like started to feel like I was still in IBLP, or I had gotten my 30-something-year-old self had gotten picked up and plucked back in. And, I think there's a lot of ways in which, like, the online spaces for people who've left really kind of, a lot of people end up playing the same roles there that they played within the cult. And so it's kind of like, it's still the cult, but just without Bill Gothard, sometimes.
Yeah.
And that all started to feel, very overwhelming. I think that there's a real darkness here, whatever happened with IBLP, it was incredibly dark and incredibly wrong. And I think, re-immersing myself in that world had a huge negative impact on my mental health for a very long time, to the point that in 2020, I decided, fuck this, no more. I'm giving up on this project. I'm not going to keep investigating. I'm just going to forget about this entirely because it's just not good for me. It's just not what I need in my life right now. And then in 2022, I was just kind of sitting in my backyard next to I had a fire going. I was drinking a Tito's and soda. I was doing a Dark Side of the Moon sing along with tears streaming down my face, just peak feeling sorry for myself. And I got a Facebook message from a woman. She said, "Hi, Brooke. My name is Corey Shepard Stern. I'm an Oscar-nominated film producer, and we're making a movie about Bill Gothard, and we want you in it." And I was just
Wow.
like, hell no. I told you I was a little tipsy when this happened, so I think the first text I wrote her back was actually kind of mean. I feel embarrassed about it, where I was just like, "Well, I was doing this for 5 years and nobody wanted mine. Congratulations on your Oscar nomination." Very
Instant victim. Yeah, sure.
instant victim, absolutely. But she kind of, we started talking, and she very much wanted me to be involved. And I really felt like, despite the damage it had done to me in the past being involved with it, that it was just too important to not it is too important not to be a part of it. And I felt like, having done like 5 years of research on IBLP and Bill Gothard, like, I don't know, embarrassingly enough, if there's anybody who knows as much about it as I do.
Right.
I don't know that I'm particularly proud of that area of expertise, but it does exist. Um, and I just felt like this obligation, knowing what I know, to step forward and to offer that as a part of this.
Absolutely. And I know, like, the role that you played in this documentary, I mean, it was very, very clear that you were the expert. You had all the info. And so all those years worth of research, even though, it didn't culminate in the documentary that you wanted to do, it certainly was a huge help, I'm sure, for the producers, the directors, and even the other people that were in the film, just the support that you were able to offer there. And I mean, I think it shows in how successful the documentary has been. It's just, it's mind blowing. #1 documentary series on Prime Video ever.
I can't even tell you how many rooms I went into and pitched this idea. And when it's so close to home, when it's part of your experience, you don't feel like you're pitching a movie idea. You feel like you're pitching yourself, and doors would slam and they would say, "No one will watch this. No one will be interested. No one will understand. This is too weird. This is too dark," over and over and over. And it feels very validating to realize that I was right. There was something here, and this was something that will resonate with people. It's resonated way beyond anything I ever could have imagined, but it's still, I don't know.
It's overwhelming for me.
It is overwhelming. I think that's why I'm a little bit at loss of words sometimes. It's been very overwhelming.
Because just the podcast series that I've been doing, the response and the outreach that I've received has been overwhelmingly positive, and I'm so grateful for it. But at the same time, you just feel lost a lot of times. So on this much larger scale with Prime Video, I'm sure the letters, the emails, the DMs that you've been receiving have been a lot.
And it's been really interesting. I think, the most powerful part about it is how many people saw themselves in it. I think that when I first did this back in 2015, when I Could Have Been a Duggar Wife came out, I definitely got a lot of messages, from people who were like, "I was in solitary confinement at ITC. I went to Russia." I got a lot of messages from people who were involved, and telling their stories was one of the things that inspired me to do this and want to make a project about it, was because I realized I had spent all this time feeling sorry for myself. And then when I heard other people's stories, I realized almost everyone had it so much worse than I did. And I wanted people to know about that. And so I feel like, getting these out here getting these stories out there. And then the reaction is from so many people like yourself. I recognize myself in this. This is resonating with me. And it's not just ex-IBLP people. I think it's a lot of people who grew up within the Christian homeschool movement, the evangelical movement. I think that this is a reckoning and almost like a public liberation. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because I agree. I think it's the conservative Christian homeschool crowd is really identifying with, even if they weren't in IBLP, but even Scientology. I've had Scientologists reach out to me and say this is so familiar. Fundamental Mormons reaching out. It's very fundamental Catholics even. I mean, it's across the board that people identify with these types of extremist upbringings and how damaging it can really be. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's just such an important message to have out there. And I think that's, why you're getting the response that you are, is because people need to hear this stuff. People really do need to hear this stuff. One of the things in the documentary that, I was disappointed that, we didn't dive into, or they didn't dive into more, was your experience confronting Bill Gothard. Because how many years did you spend with Bill Gothard while you were still in the cult as part of his?
I didn't spend any years with him. I never met him. I grew up, at an IBLP church, going to the seminars, doing the children's institutes, all of that stuff. But I had, I was very much on the outer rim. I hadn't met him personally.
I got you. Okay.
But growing up in isolation with his teachings,
yeah,
he'd come to really loom, super large mythologically over my mind, as if, if every time I thought of God, there was kind of like this avatar of Bill Gothard standing in for him, like kind of being unable to separate those two categories in my mind.
Right.
And so when I was working on my doc, we went to Chicago for a hearing. There was supposed to be a hearing related to the lawsuit against IBLP. But we were already in Chicago and it got canceled. And it just so happened that John Cornish was in town that day for the hearing also. And so he sent me a Facebook message and was like, hey, let's get lunch. And so me and my producer went out for Mexican food with John. And he gave me Bill Gothard's phone number.
Wow. Wow.
And I said, my producer was sitting next to me and she said, I think it would be really cool if we called him. And then we just like rolled up at his house this afternoon. And I was just terrified. I was like, hell no, there's no way I'm doing that. And John Cornish was like, you got to do that. You got to go.
The peer pressure from John Cornish. I love it.
Right. Exactly. So I called him on the phone, and just to make sure that John still had the right number, because I didn't know if it would actually be him, but he answered with that strange, lilting, elfish voice that he has, And I thought, what could I say to? It's definitely him. I know it's him now. I just need to get him off the phone. What can I say to get him off the phone really quick? And so I said, excuse me, sir, are you registered as a Democrat?
He just hung up immediately?
No, he screamed at me for about 10 minutes. He was just like, oh, I don't know how anyone could ever be a Democrat in this day and age. And he's a lot older now than I think he was like when you met him, because he has that kind of dodgy old man screaming at the clouds vibe going now,
That's so funny.
He doesn't have like huge stadiums to play for anymore, but like you give him any kind of audience and he just starts in.
He's the crazy old guy on Facebook now.
Right. Literally. So I called him back a few minutes later and then asked if I told him, just the truth, that I had grown up in the program. And he said, well, how lucky for you. Your dad is a very wise man. And I said I had never met him and I just would like to meet him. Could I come over? And he said yes, if I was with someone else. And my producer came with me. Excuse me, sorry, coffee. So she actually, they actually interviewed her for Shiny Happy People. And I think originally had a much more in-depth version of this story included in the film. But for time constraints, it kind of got kind of swept aside.
Sure. So when you went and met him, then and you kind of explained in the documentary that you kind of felt yourself getting pulled in and then just left. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So can you give me any additional detail about what that meeting was like?
Oh, well, it was, he still lives in the house that he was born in. So he's lived in
Mm-hmm.
that house for 90 years. And the house has this very kind of mausoleum feel. You walk in and you feel like you're, walking into a museum from a previous time. And I think the thing that really got me that day was we were sitting there talking, and I was talking to Mr. Gothard,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the man, the myth, the legend. And I looked down, he was wearing a full suit, and I looked down and he had like a little bit of coffee stain on his tie.
Oh.
And I just in that second thought, why would God ever spill coffee on his tie? And there was just that moment in which all of my imagination that was wrapped up in him kind of just instantly unraveled, and I realized this is a man.
Yeah.
This is a person. There's nothing different between this person and any other person, and this person's ideas aren't any more important or real than anyone else's ideas. And seeing him in the flesh as a human being for the first time, I think drastically changed the hold that he had come to have over me.
Mm.
First, from growing up around this stuff or in this stuff, and then as an adult, kind of re-immersing myself in that world through that research, he got his tentacles kind of in
Mm-hmm.
even deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And that experience of seeing him as just as a flawed human being who can spill coffee on their clothes, was kind of like that moment where in The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy pulls back the curtain and, she sees the wizard behind with a little switch, he's standing there behind the curtain with the switches.
Right. Yeah.
It was kind of like that moment. This is just a person. They don't need to have any power over me
Mm.
anymore.
Wow. I mean, what an incredibly profound revelation in that moment, just from seeing a coffee stain, right? Incredible. That's incredible. And what was the conversation like that y'all had?
Well, it was kind of very, it was very stilted and kind of polite. I don't think he hears very well at this point, so you have to speak,
Mm.
incredibly loud. He asked me questions. The first question that he asked me when I sat down, was my spiritual gift.
Of course.
Teacher Mercy.
Okay. All right. Okay. I was going to guess prophet, but I guess.
Oh, yeah. I think maybe I'm a I was gonna say like a teacher in the sheets prophet I don't know, teacher in the streets prophet. Like, I feel like I'm probably a prophet, but I don't want to admit it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. I got you.
um, so he asked me, I told him my spiritual gift, and then he said, "You're a second born, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I can tell, you're very eager to please and ambitious." And then he kind of just started bragging about how good he is at telling people's birth order. And so he told me that when he was younger, he could go through a McDonald's drive-through and tell the person who was handing him his fries, "You're a third born."
What
Just
a
from kind
weird
of
flex.
looking. I know, right? And I had actually kind of forgotten about that weird birth order stuff from his teachings, but it's weird to see, so much of his own teachings seem to have calcified in his brain, even though he's not in any way publicly teaching them anymore. It's still the way in which he approaches every conversation and interaction in the world, even though he's not getting the same kind of narcissistic supply for saying it that he used to.
Right. Yeah. He doesn't have thousands, millions of people attending his seminars, listening to this shrivel. Right. And so, he guesses your birth order, probably talks about himself a bunch. Did y'all ever get to a point where you could share with him how damaging it was for you growing up, in this cult that he created?
No, in fact, that wasn't something that I even attempted at that point.
Mm.
At this point, the idea in my mind was that since we were working on this project, I very much wanted to have like a Frost versus Nixon, Brooke versus Bill moment, there at the end where you interview him on camera. And so I think at that point, I was just trying to create a connection and a rapport and a familiarity so that I could stay in contact with him and hopefully coax him into eventually like doing an on-camera interview with me that I think would probably been a little bit more confrontational. It is kind of tricky though with Bill because he's so old at this point, that after meeting him in person, I kind of rethought that idea because I thought it's just going to look like elder abuse on camera. People aren't going to see the huge wake of damage that he left behind him. People are going to see an old man being bullied on camera.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. It would have to be a very delicate approach, right? Otherwise, people aren't going to feel bad for, these millions of victims that were part of the cult. They're just going to end up feeling bad for this frail old man, right? Have you talked to him since the documentary aired?
No, I haven't. The last time I spoke to him was on the phone, I think in 2019. I haven't spoken to him in several years. I do know one of my docu siblings prank called him a few weeks ago. I think the weekend that it came out. I don't want to out anybody, but I definitely do know one person at least prank called him. And there were some kind of fake reporters like who ambushed him in his driveway a couple days ago, asking him if he'd seen it. I don't know if Bill's seen it. He does have a TV in his house. So he's breaking his own rules.
Wow.
So it's possible he could have watched it on that. He did make a threatening post on Twitter a few days ago, in which he basically said that he was calling down God's wrath to activate arrows against all of us.
Yes, I saw that. That was what was it, like a four bullet tweet, which I was surprised by. Usually those are going to be 3 bullets or 7 bullets. That's always a 7-point plan with Gothard, right?
Didn't he have to pay Elon to get those extra characters?
I think he did actually, because he is a Twitter Blue account. But I also, so from what I understand, there's a guy that's been like kind of his right-hand dude for many years now that moderates his Facebook, moderates his Twitter, and kind of handles all the postings based on what I've heard.
Bill Gothard doesn't know how to use the computer. I think that's just a true fact. That's not that's not
shade. That's just
Davey, can you and I've been wanting to do a roast of Bill Gothard forever. Could we make this happen? Could you and I work
sit
together?
Down, write a roast for Bill Gothard?
Just like, I think it would go viral. You and me roasting Gothard. Why not?
I love that idea. We're doing
it's pretty fun.
We're going to be doing that live show in Austin that I told you about at the end of July.
Okay.
Maybe that's how we close it out, is we just do a live roast of Bill Gothard and IBLP.
I would love that. We could get like a little cardboard stand up, like
get a cutout of Bill. Yeah. That's perfect.
But he doesn't know how to use the computer, so he has a young man that was converted on a missionary trip in Mexico, who kind of grew up in a kind of I think he might have grown up in a Gothard-based orphanage in Mexico, and this young man is living with Bill in his home. The last I heard that he was living in his home and kind of doing his online stuff. So it could be like Bill dictated the 4 bullet point tweet.
Right. Yeah.
And someone typed it for him too.
That's kind of what I was assuming.
It sounds very him.
It does. And we know he's still writing. He's still very prolific. He's still publishing books. I saw a post. It was basically like a happy birthday post to Bill Gothard. And apparently some of his close friends attended this birthday dinner, and as his token of appreciation to his friends, he gave them his newest book. They all got signed copies of his newest book. Yeah. I mean, the ego on this guy is crazy.
It is crazy.
After all these years.
Yeah, after all these years.
Yeah. And the conversations that you had with Bill, I mean, obviously these weren't confrontational at all, but did he ever admit any kind of wrongdoing over the course of the years that he was exploiting people?
I don't think he's ever admitted to any wrongdoing, ever. I think he sees himself as the infallible prophet of God, God's mediator here on earth. I don't think he's capable of the kind of self-reflection to ever take accountability or responsibility. And I think that you see that in my opinion, across the evangelical movement and across the Christian homeschool movement, you see a lack of accountability and a lack of responsibility for the ways that I think maybe even the best intentioned people went a little bit off the rails.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the things that I appreciate about the relationship I have with my family so much is that, both of my parents admitted after the fact, we didn't know what was going on. We never meant to get caught up in this stuff. We're so sorry for what we put you and your siblings through. And, so I really appreciate that mentality that admits wrongdoing. But you're right. In so many of these fundamental Christian circles, and certainly Bill Gothard is no exception here, you never admit that you were wrong. You gloss over it, you justify it. I think Bill Gothard at some point, released a statement that, he shouldn't have, held hands and touched these girls. Right. But never admitted to any kind of abuse at all. And as we know, when the group of women tried to sue him, he threatened to countersue instead of apologizing or releasing any kind of statement, just countersued or threatened to countersue, and then tried to get the court to approve sanctions, which they did not. And even on his social media now, it's just full of misinformation and lies, outright lies about the events that transpired with that lawsuit, which is just, it's crazy to me because maybe he doesn't know that you can just go look this stuff up on the internet and see what actually happened. And he's out here presenting this false narrative still. It just blows me away.
And I think, I think it's worth noting too with like his statement, it is an admission of holding hands is such a minimalization of what he did to so many girls. And I don't think we've even scratched the surface of Bill's malfeasance with women or his labor abuses or his probably extreme personal abuses or probably horrifying family history. I think we've only begun to scratch the surface of some of the widespread effects that he had. But I think we're going to be finding out with the release of Shiny Happy People. I think more people are going to come forward. I think that it's this is just the first wave even
Absolutely.
Of what I think is going to be a wave of as large of a wake of destruction as he left behind him. I think that's coming back around to him. And we've only kind of just started that.
Oh, 100% agree. And then there's the other documentary that's going to be coming out, Until the Truth. And that dives a lot more into some of the, the graphic details of the abuse. I had a conversation. I mentioned to you, I had a conversation with a lady who I don't want to mention her name, but back in the 90s when she was 21 and Bill Gothard was, in his late 50s, I think he was maybe 59. He told this 21-year-old lady that he wanted to marry her. So it goes a lot further and a lot deeper than we even saw on the Shiny Happy People documentary. And I think you're absolutely right. There's more to come. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
And one of the reasons, that we know that there's more women out there is Gothard, had a pattern in which he overlapped them. So he always had a girl coming in, a current girl, and a girl going out. And he used them to manipulate each other, and he used them to groom, to make them more amenable. He used the competition to make them more vulnerable to him and open to him. Well, if Bill Gothard from let's just say the late 70s, let's say 1978 to 2003 had 3 girls overlapping at any time, that's a lot of people still out there that we haven't heard from.
Absolutely. Because there were 30 women involved in the lawsuit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think 19 of those were 19 19 of those were accusations against Gothard. There were also a lot of accusations against other people in the original version of the lawsuit who were against IBLP bigwigs and people who ran training centers that either ignored abuse or perpetuated it at those places.
Exactly. I mean, it was just rampant. It was rampant across the leadership of that cult. 100%.
Absolutely.
And that's what we've discussed with so many other folks on this podcast series, is that IBLP and really the fundamental Christian ideology is a breeding ground for predatory and abusive behavior, period. And whether it's Gothard or some other leader, they all take advantage of this environment, I guess.
Well, I think we've seen that across our culture. Honestly, I think that there seems to be a certain group of predatory people who, intentionally use institutions to take advantage of people who are vulnerable. And institutions seek to maximize control, so they're the perfect breeding ground for abuse and the perfect breeding ground for predators who want to use that power to control for abuse. And I wonder, it's not just an IBLP problem or a religious problem. It seems to be a American problem, and it seems to be a worldwide problem.
I think it's a human problem, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting that you put it that way, because we, in episode 3 of the podcast series that I'm doing, I spoke with a young lady named Grace who grew up in the cult as well, and we specifically talked that there's 2 types of people that you would see in the IBLP cult. You would see predators and you would see prey. And that's how I think every cult works. And I think you're right. I think it's just a human problem, right? You've got those 2 types of people, the predators and the prey.
Yeah. And in IBLP, we call them prophets and mercies.
Exactly.
We actually have names for them. You go back and you look at it and you're like, how did we not notice how we were all being set up for this? I don't know if we just didn't have enough awareness of how cults work, or how authoritarianism works, or narcissistic abuse works. I'm not sure, like, if we were just missing the model, but you look back at it now and you're like, this is pretty. It was right there.
Right. It was right under our nose the whole time. It was almost like if you were a prophet, that was your hall pass to just be an evil asshole to anyone. And it was like, oh, well, they're a prophet, so they're allowed to do that. That's their spiritual gift. So you have to listen and not take offense. It's crazy. Yeah, it really is. Now I've heard rumors of a Shiny Happy People season 2. Can you talk about that at all, or is that still in the works? Or
I can the door is definitely open for more Shiny Happy People. Absolutely. I mean, we're the #1 docuseries debut of all time on Amazon. We've converted more Prime memberships than any other documentary on Amazon.
Wow.
So it's definitely open if people would like to see more Shiny Happy People. Go to Amazon Prime's social media and tell them, because I don't get to make that decision, unfortunately.
Yeah. So I think that's how people support, is just telling Prime, we want more. We
want more, right?
More about what happened with IBLP. Yeah.
And I know that, everyone would be on board for more. So if we tell them, if you tell them, we will come.
Perfect. And how can people follow you, learn more about your story, Brooke?
I am at www.trippinwithbrookearnold.com. Tripping in both ways.
I love it.
I'm also Tripping with Brooke Arnold on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. On Twitter, I'm the Brooke Arnold.
Perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
so they can find all your links on the website, or if you just want to go follow individually on any of the social media platforms, there you go.
Right.
Tripping with Brooke or the Brooke Arnold. Got it. Perfect. Well, Brooke, thank you so much for being willing to talk about this stuff. I know that what you said on the documentary just resonated so much with people all over the world, and so I really appreciate you being willing to share your story. It meant a lot to a lot of people.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just so grateful to be able to be a part of this. It feels like we're at a turning point in our culture in which, these kinds of things aren't going to be allowed to happen anymore.
Yeah, and that's obviously what we hope for. There's so much information out there now. People have access through the internet, social media, whatever, that you hope, cults like this can't flourish quite as much as they did back then,
Right.
but we'll see. Like we said, it really seems to be a human problem when you get right down to it. So you never know, but we'll be here to call it out, right? Perfect. Well, Brooke, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dave.